Captain Cale Draven stood at the helm of the command center aboard the starship Raven's Blade. His angular features were sharp under the low lights, his steely blue eyes locked on the holographic display in front of him. Around him, the crew watched in tense silence, waiting for their captain's next move. A message from the Cauldron Empire glowed ominously, the words etched in the cold, sharp symbols of their alien language. It wasn't the first time the humans of the Terran Dominion had faced the threat of annihilation, but this was different. They want us to drink what Cale's voice boomed, breaking the silence, his disbelief palpable. The entire crew had faced countless threats since joining the intergalactic stage, a universe full of wars, bioweapons, and existential threats, but nothing had prepared them for this. "It's real, Captain," said Commander Soren Vale, his voice steady, though his face betrayed an undercurrent of dread. He stood at Cale's side, his dark eyes glancing toward the holographic screen displaying the message from the Cauldron Emperor Xeran Threx. The reports from Delos Prime confirm it. The Cauldron Empire has developed a liquid weapon, a bioweapon they call the Aquam Dominus. It can infiltrate any organic system through water, spreading across entire planets. It rewrites the DNA of living beings, turning them into hybrid slaves to the Cauldron will. Earth is their next target. A heavy silence descended over the command center. The Cauldrons were notorious across the galaxy for their ruthless conquests and bioengineered horrors. But this was beyond even the worst nightmares of human history. Cale's jaw clenched, his brow furrowed deeply as he processed the information. And their ultimatum, Soren hesitated, his hands tightening behind his back. Surrender, or face total annihilation through hydroassimilation. They've given us 5 days to comply. After that, they'll deploy it across Earth's water supply. Cale took a deep breath, his fingers curling into fists. The thought of Earth, humanity's cradle, succumbing to such an insidious weapon filled him with a rage he had never known. They expect us to kneel? To hand them everything we've built? Yes, sir. They know Earth's importance as a hub of resources and as a symbol for our people. They think we'll capitulate to avoid destruction. Cale straightened his stance, his eyes narrowing into slits. They think wrong. We're humans. We've faced extinction before, and every time we've come back stronger. The crew around him murmured in agreement, their confidence rallying behind their captain's defiance. But Soren wasn't so easily convinced. "With respect," Captain Soren began, "this weapon is unlike anything we've ever faced. It doesn't just kill, it transforms. Once it gets into Earth's atmosphere, we won't even know what's happening before it's too late." Cale turned away from the holographic Earth displayed before him, pacing back and forth as his mind raced. Surrender was out of the question, but how could they fight something that turned the very fabric of life against itself? He stopped suddenly, the beginnings of an idea flickering in his mind. It was reckless, insane even, but maybe, just maybe. "What do we know about the Aquam Dominus?" he asked, his voice sharp. "Its composition, how does it work?" Soren blinked, surprised by the sudden change in direction. It's water, sir. But not like any water we've seen. It's an amalgam of nanites, microbial agents, and heavy water isotopes. It's highly reactive, but stable until it enters a living organism. Then it begins to reprogram the host's DNA almost immediately. We've tested it on isolated human tissue samples. The results were catastrophic. Cale's mind spun with possibilities. "But what if," he said slowly, "we didn't resist it? What if we let it in?" The command center erupted into protests, disbelief ringing out from every corner. "Are you serious?" Captain Soren demanded, stepping forward. "That's suicide. You're talking about letting an alien bioweapon into our systems." But Cale's mind was already moving faster than the objections around him. "No, listen. The Aquam Dominus transforms what it touches into something that serves the Cauldrons. But what if we could control it? What if we could reprogram the transformation?" Soren stared at him, the color draining from his face. "To do that, we'd need a host, someone willing to let it infect them." someone to adapt to it from within. Not someone, Kale corrected. The room fell silent, shock rippling through the crew. Sir Soren said quietly, "You can't. We don't even know if this is possible." Kale met his gaze, his expression hard. "If I'm going to ask others to follow this path, I have to be the first to walk it." The Raven's Blade's medbay had been transformed into a makeshift lab. Reinforced containment fields surrounded the area where Kale Draven now stood, preparing to undertake the most dangerous experiment in human history. The vial of Aquam Dominus, suspended in the core of the room, shimmered with an eerie, sentient glow, deep blue, alive with some malevolent intelligence. Dr. Alara Soren, head scientist aboard the ship, approached with a neural scanner, her face pale with dread. "We've established a neural link to monitor your brain activity, Captain. Once it's inside you, we'll have no way of knowing if we can stop it. There's no guarantee you'll stay." Kale stared at the vial. "Just record everything. We need to understand this weapon inside and out." Alara handed him the vial, and Kale unscrewed the top, the thick liquid swirling as though it was aware of what was about to happen. He took a deep breath and, with a final glance at Soren, downed the contents in one swift motion. The effect was instantaneous. Pain like wildfire seared through Kale's veins, as though his very cells were being torn apart and stitched back together. He stumbled, his vision blurring as his body convulsed violently. Alarms blared throughout the medbay, the neural link spiking with chaotic activity. "Captain, can you hear me?" Alara's voice was distant, barely cutting through the roaring in Kale's mind. He gasped, forcing himself to focus through the pain. The Aquam Dominus spread through his bloodstream, corrupting, transforming, but he wasn't letting it take him. He pushed back against the invasion, his mind battling the alien force inside him. Minutes passed like hours, and slowly, miraculously, the pain began to subside. The chaos on the monitors leveled out, and Kale's body calmed. He stood, breathing heavily, his muscles aching but intact. "I'm still me," Kale muttered, looking down at his hands. He could feel the Aquam Dominus inside him, a living entity, but it wasn't controlling him. "I'm controlling it over the next weeks." Kale's transformation became the foundation of a new hope for humanity. The science team, led by Alara, ran tests, and what they discovered was astounding. The Aquam Dominus hadn't just failed to take over Kale, it had enhanced him. His strength, speed, and cognitive abilities were far beyond human limits. He had become something more. "If we can replicate this," Alara said, her voice trembling with excitement, "we could create an army of enhanced soldiers. We could turn the Cauldron's greatest weapon against them." Kale's plan unfolded rapidly. A group of volunteers was chosen from among the Raven's Blade's elite men and women willing to undergo the same transformation. They called themselves the Hydro Legion, a force unlike any humanity had ever fielded. Their bodies, like Kale's, were enhanced with the Aquam Dominus, giving them the strength and speed to face the Cauldrons on their own terms. The day of reckoning finally arrived. The Hydro Legion stood aboard the strike ship Invictus, preparing to launch their final assault on the Cauldron homeworld of Xeron Prime. Kale Draven stood at the front, his body still humming with the alien power coursing through his veins. "We make history today," Kyle said, his voice carrying the weight of the moment. "The Cauldrons think we'll kneel. They think their bioweapon will force us to surrender. They have no idea what's coming." The Invictus blasted through the atmosphere of Xeron Prime, its shields absorbing the brunt of the Cauldron defenses. The Hydro Legion suited up, their enhanced bodies vibrating with energy as they prepared for the ground assault. The sprawling aquatic city of the Cauldrons shimmered beneath them, its biomechanical towers glowing ominously. "Stay focused," Kale ordered, his eyes locked on the Cauldron's central command ahead. "We take out their leadership. Without their emperor, the Cauldron forces will collapse." The landing was violent, but the Hydro Legion moved with lethal precision. Cauldron warriors, their pale, aquatic forms armed with bioweapons, swarmed to meet them, but they were no match for the speed and strength of the enhanced human soldiers. The streets ran blue with the blood of fallen enemies. Kale pushed forward, leading his men through the chaos, his eyes fixed on the towering command center ahead. Kale breached the command center's doors with a well-placed explosive charge, his heart pounding with adrenaline. Inside, Emperor Siren Threx stood, his alien face twisted in rage. "Your reign ends here," Kale said, leveling his weapon at the Emperor. With a single decisive shot, he ended the war. The Cauldron forces, now leaderless, crumbled under the might of the Hydro Legion. Victory was swift and total. Kale stood at the heart of the command center, his body still buzzing with the Aquam Dominus. Humanity had not only survived, they had evolved. The Cauldron Empire was no more, and the galaxy had forever changed. "We did it," Soren Vale said, stepping up beside Kale. "The war is over." Kale nodded, a fierce pride swelling in his chest. "Not just the war, Commander. We've changed everything." Kale stepped out of the command center, the heavy doors creaking open behind him as he emerged into the daylight of Siren Prime. The city, once a sprawling metropolis of biomechanical towers that shimmered with an eerie, aquatic glow, now lay in ruins. Fires dotted the skyline, the remnants of battle leaving blackened scars across the alien architecture. The distant sounds of Cauldron warships retreating filled the air, their mighty engines roaring as they fled into the sky. The Hydro Legion was already securing the last pockets of resistance. The enhanced soldiers, their bodies augmented by the same Aquam Dominus that flowed through Kale, moved with brutal efficiency. The few remaining Cauldron warriors who hadn't already fled or surrendered were swiftly dealt with. This was the final stand of the Cauldron Empire, and humanity had won. Soren Vale approached, his armor scratched and battle-worn, but his posture resolute. His dark eyes met Kale's, and for a moment they stood in silence, both understanding the weight of what they had just accomplished. "We've secured the city," Soren said, his voice still carrying that unshakable calm. "Most of the Cauldron forces have scattered, and the few that remain are in disarray. We're cleaning up the last remnants now." Kale nodded, but his mind was already elsewhere. "Good," he said, his voice distant. "But we need to be prepared. This isn't just about the Cauldron military. We've destabilized an entire empire. We need to figure out what comes next for them and for us." Soren frowned, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean, Captain? The war's over." "We've won." Kale turned to look at the horizon, his eyes scanning the crumbling remains of the Cauldron capital. "Have we? The Cauldrons have lost their leadership, but their people." He gestured to the city around them. "They're still here. They're still out there, across the galaxy. We've cut off the head of the snake, but that doesn't mean it won't strike back in some form." Soren looked down at the ground, considering Kale's words. "What are you suggesting?" Kale's eyes narrowed. "I'm suggesting that we need to be ready. We've just changed the balance of power in the galaxy. There are other species, other empires, who will see this as an opportunity. Some will want to fill the vacuum we've created. We need to be prepared for the next battle." Soren sighed, the weight of it all settling in. And Earth Kale's expression darkened. "We've saved Earth, but the cost was high. Now we need to rebuild. And we need to figure out what to do with the Aquam Dominus." Soren's eyes widened. "The Aquam Dominus? You're not suggesting we use it again?" Kale turned to face him fully, his eyes hard as steel. "It's already part of us, Commander. It's part of the Hydro Legion. The question isn't whether we'll use it. The question is how." Weeks passed, and the Raven's blade remained in orbit around Siren Prime, overseeing the cleanup efforts on the surface. The collapse of the Cauldron Empire had sent shockwaves across the galaxy, once the most feared military force in known space. The Cauldrons were now leaderless and fragmented. Several human warships had arrived to assist in securing the planet and ensuring the Cauldron threat was neutralized. In the command center of the Raven's Blade, Kyle and his senior officers gathered around a tactical display. Soren stood at his side, along with Dr. Alara Soren, who had returned from the surface after overseeing additional research on the Aquam Dominus. "We've completed a full analysis of the cauldron systems," Alara said, her tone brisk and professional, though there was a gleam of excitement in her eyes. Their entire society was built around the central command structure. With the Emperor gone, it's only a matter of time before the rest of their empire collapses into civil war. Kale nodded. "And the Aquam Dominus?" Alara hesitated, glancing at the data on her display. "We've learned a lot since your transformation, Captain. The Aquam Dominus is more than just a weapon, it's a catalyst. It doesn't just destroy, it enhances. Your body and the bodies of the Hydro Legion have adapted to it in ways we never expected." "And the risks?" Kyle asked, his voice low. "The risks are significant," Alara admitted. "The Aquam Dominus is still largely unknown territory. While the transformations have been successful so far, we can't predict long-term effects, and if it were to fall into the wrong hands." Kale's gaze hardened. "It won't. We'll keep control of it." Soren shifted uneasily. "But what about Earth? If people find out what the Aquam Dominus can do, there will be factions, governments, everyone will want it." Kale leaned over the tactical display, his eyes flickering as he stared at the galaxy map. "We can't let it be used as a weapon against us. That's why we need to ensure only the right people have access to it. If we can use it to defend Earth, to defend humanity, then we'll keep it out of the wrong hands." Soren was silent for a long moment, then nodded. "I trust you, Captain." Kale straightened, his decision made. "Prepare the fleet. We're taking this fight to the next level. The galaxy will soon know that humanity is stronger than ever, and we're not finished yet." If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. For every comment that says, we will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.